If you are pregnant, listen up because there is an upcoming live pregnancy workshop available to help you prepare your body and pelvic floor for birth and beyond. We discuss ways to reduce risk of perineal tears and episiotomy. We learn how to reduce risk of pelvic floor trauma and, importantly, ways to support a strong postnatal recovery. This free workshop called Birth Strong is physio-created and designed to help you feel more confident and empowered about your upcoming childbirth experience. Head to fitnessmama.com/pregnancy workshop and the link is in the show notes. Once more, that's www.fitnessmama.com/pregnancy workshop, all one word. Can't wait to see you there. If you are pregnant or you've recently had a baby, this podcast is for you. I am your host, Kath Bequee, a physiotherapist working in women's health and mum of 3. Inside my online program, Fitness Mama, I just love helping support women to care for their bodies during pregnancy, prepare their bodies for birth, and support their after-birth recovery, helping them feel confident and strong inside out during this important stage of their lives. In this podcast, join me each week as we dive into all things pregnancy care, childbirth, and postnatal recovery, helping you through every step of the journey. It is absolutely possible to feel amazing and confident in our bodies during this motherhood journey, and I want that for you. Come and say hi to me on Instagram @fitnessmama, and let's dive into today's episode. Welcome back to the Pregnancy, Birth and Recovery podcast. So this episode today is part 2. As you might know, I chat to Brianne, an amazing member inside Fitness Mama. And in this episode today, she'll share her beautiful birth story with her little baby boy, Seth. She will take us through her pregnancy journey, her birth experience, and her recovery too. You might have skipped over part 1 where we discuss conceiving through grief. We discuss a termination for medical reasons of a previous pregnancy. But this part 2 episode, it's a beautiful story that Brianne has to share. So whether or not you've listened to part 1 or perhaps you just wanted to skip that and go straight for this positive birth story, part 2, I am sure you're going to find it a beautiful story. I thank Brianne for her amazing, courage in sharing her story, her openness, and being so honest. So thank you, Brianne. Enjoy, everyone. Hope you enjoyed as much as I enjoyed recording this episode, Brianne. Welcome to part 2. Brianne, thank you again for joining us for part 2 of your second birth story. So really it's part 3, isn't it? Where we're going to discuss who you've just mentioned in the previous episode, I don't even know how to describe it, Brianne, emotional, turbulent, the challenging times that you have had in the last few years. And now this episode, I trust, will be a little bit lighter because you've got a beautiful story to share. So take it away, Brianne.
Yeah, so I guess where we left off was we went back to trying to conceive again for a couple of months, and my body just wasn't in the right place, if I'm honest. Like, my cycles were doing weird things. Yeah, it just wasn't in its happy regulated space. So after a few months, we hadn't used IVF in previous pregnancies, but I just said to my husband, like, I need extra support. I need for someone else to take some of the responsibility of tracking my cycles and doing all that. You have a heavy load, and I just needed to outsource a bit of that. So we went to an IVF clinic, and I was a bit nervous they weren't going to take me, to be honest, because technically I can conceive, and the abnormality we had is just considered, like a 1 in 1,000 bad luck, not anything inherited. So I went in there very armed with, like, these are all the reasons why I want IVF. Please take me as a patient, and they were happy to do that, which was good. So we did 1 cycle of IVF.
And sorry to interrupt, but in terms of those reasons for IVF,
Yeah.
can you just nut out a few of those reasons that were going through your mind?
Yeah. So I just basically told them that I wanted IVF with pre-genetic testing because we'd lost our son to a genetic abnormality. I just said, I'm not emotionally in a place where I'm willing to take that risk again.
Yeah.
And the only way to test is to do it through IVF. I felt like I would have be able to take some relief from knowing this embryo was already tested. It doesn't have the same condition or a similar condition. There's still all sorts of things that can, go wrong with the genetically healthy embryo, but it's eliminating some of that risk. I explained the process, the journey we've been on, and I also just had some concerns about my cycle. So, the month that we decided to do IVF, I had ovulated around day 18 and my period had started on day 21. That's 3 days between ovulation and my period starting. I know that's not long enough. Even if my egg had fertilized, it wasn't long enough for it to implant and tell my body not to have a period. So there was these things happening and I'm going, well, every month potentially at this point is not productive. If we can watch my cycle and intervene and do the testing, that was my reasons. And they were happy with that. They honestly, as soon as I said I wanted testing and I'd had a loss, they were supportive pretty much.
Yeah.
But it is a big financial commitment. Particularly some of the bulk billing clinics, they don't do the pre-genetic testing, so you do have to usually go to one of the more expensive clinics. So that's a big outlay, and I'm obviously very privileged to have had the means to make that decision fairly easily for us. So we did one cycle. I already knew I had low AMH from a previous check. So I went into it thinking, I don't think I'm going to get many eggs, which is not a problem when you're trying naturally. You only need 1 egg a month. But obviously in IVF, you're trying to stimulate as many eggs in one cycle as you can. So we knew that. So we were hoping for maybe 5 eggs. And we ended up getting 12, which was great. But then as of day, there's all these steps you go through once you've retrieved your egg. I will say, because I had low egg numbers, the physical side of IVF was not too challenging for me in terms of the injections and things like that. I've had girlfriends who've made lots of eggs, and the actual physical pain of being so bloated from having so many eggs kind of growing was a lot, whereas I had low numbers, so it wasn't really very significant for me. So it was all pretty okay from that side. Yeah, so we started with 12 eggs. I think by day 2 we were down to 5. So that was a bit concerning. And then by day, because you're waiting to see how many embryos you have on day 5. So by day 2, we'd already dropped from 12 to 5. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, I hope we have 1, and if not, we'll go and start again. But I was quite relieved. Yeah, day 5, we had 3 embryos. And they said they're all perfect grades. They look under the microscope and they rank them, and they're all top rated embryos. So I was feeling quite confident. Yeah, we only want 1 more baby, 3 great embryos, that should be good. And then they send them off for the genetic testing. And so then we waited maybe 2 to 3 weeks to get the genetic results. And only 1 of our embryos was genetically normal and 2 were abnormal with various trisomies, which was another bit of a blow. Because a lot of the time with our son's abnormality, we were told, it's just bad luck. You're young. I was 32 at the time of doing IVF, which in IVF space is considered quite young. We're both healthy and all of those things. I'm in the IVF world. I'm doing all the supplements. I'm doing all the acupuncture. I am just doing it all. So I was quite hopeful that you're always wanting your body to redeem itself. So I was quite hopeful they'd all be normal, genetically normal. So when they were, I was quite disappointed.
And excuse my ignorance, but is this they would have tested your eggs prior, I assume, and they tested the sperm prior, or
No. So,
do they know at what stage it became abnormal? Is it when the egg and the sperm joined, or was it?
Yeah, so they don't. They look at the egg follicles on ultrasound, but there's no testing at that stage. So the first stage that is once you have the embryo. And with Klinefelter syndrome, it can be majority of trisomies, they say, is from the eggs, but Klinefelter syndrome can be either. So I always had this little like secret desire, like maybe it's not me at all, you know. You can't help it. So then, when that came back, I was a bit like, oh, okay, no, like, you know, I'm 32, but my eggs are not, the quality of them is not, doesn't seem to be really correlated. Yeah. So, but, you know, spoke with my specialist and they just said, look, you've got one healthy embryo and you want one child. So let's transfer this one embryo. And if it doesn't take, we can then look at what we might do differently next time. And IVF is a total mind game because, you know, I've had friends that have done the exact same protocol, the exact same thing 2 months apart, and one cycle's not gone very well, and the next cycle they've had incredible results. And it's just, it's a very big mind game like that. You're always looking for a reason, but it's, Yeah.
And how long was the process between, like, from start to implantation?
Yeah, so it's quite fast.
Transfer.
Yeah, when I had my first appointment, my first consultation, I was like 2 or 3 days off my period starting. And they were just like, look, if you want to go ahead, we could really expedite, get all this stuff in place, and you could start in 3 days. And so that's not very normal. I've already had a lot of testing and stuff done when we had our loss. So we already had like a bit of the background work already done. So we jumped in. So I think I went and saw them in May. Our cycle, I guess, was June. And then we had our transfer August, I think. So the gap for us was because we wanted the genetic testing. If I didn't want the genetic testing, I mean, I could have had a transfer, you know, straight away. Yeah. But we had a bit of a month or so, and then I had a month or two of cancelled transfers because we only had the one embryo. My specialist was quite conservative. Well, not quite conservative, actually. My body just wasn't responding very well in the prep for transfer. So we had a couple cycles where my lining just wasn't thick enough, and we didn't want to transfer my one and only healthy embryo with, you know, a low chance of success. So those cycles were hard because mentally you're like, I'm going to have my transfer. It's going to be next week. I could be pregnant. And, you know, you get really excited when you've made it to that step. Yeah. And then you find out 2 days earlier, no, it's cancelled, wait another month, you know. But in the scheme of things, really quick, you know. And then we were extremely, extremely fortunate that our one and only embryo implanted and became a successful pregnancy, which I do not take that for granted at all. When you are in the IVF space, you can see how long and hard that can be for women. So we were fortunate. Yeah.
Okay, so
that was just the
what's that?
That was just the best news. That was just you can't really believe it that you could get lucky in that way. Yeah. And knowing that it was genetically, you know, chromosomally at the macro level it was normal gave me some hope. Yeah.
And you mentioned for the last pregnancy there was a lot of anxiety about miscarriage.
Yeah.
Was it the same this time around?
It was, though I would say slightly less, because I think the majority of miscarriages are due to these sorts of trisomies. And I tested, so I know, okay, I can eliminate, I think it might be 70 to 80% or something of miscarriages that are due to those reasons. So I'm thinking, you know, there is still 20% or 30% of miscarriages that there's, you know, was a genetically healthy baby. I definitely took some solace in going, you know, I've grown my daughter. I grew my son. He was growing happily. He wasn't going to be leaving anywhere. Like potentially my uterus and its ability to grow a baby is quite good. That's kind of, I took some, I think, hope in that. So I was still nervous, but I had a little bit more confidence than I did probably the last time. Yeah.
Did you know it was a little boy?
No. So in Australia, you're not allowed to, they test the genetics, so they know that information. But in Australia, you're not legally allowed to know the gender of your embryo at transfer, just for like election reasons. So if you do want to do that, you can do that in the US. Choose the gender of the embryo that you want to transfer. Not in Australia. And we debated. We'd had surprises, you know, like with my daughter. And so I thought, I'll just wait and hopefully have a surprise again. But I thought if I needed to emotionally know, I would find out a bit later in the pregnancy. Yeah. yeah, so I was,
Okay.
nice and morning sick.
Oh,
We still did NIPT like as an extra, just with that, we do everything the same that we would do in any other pregnancy, just in case
yeah.
testing, was,
Yeah.
there's like a point, whatever chance it was wrong or whatever. But yeah, everything came back good. And I think, with pregnancies after loss, for me, I don't think there was ever a point in that pregnancy I felt safe. I had a couple extra scans in the first 20 weeks because I was anxious more than about structural abnormalities that are not genetically caused, because that can still happen. So I was more like, my midwifery brain's like assessing all these other risks. And I think I remember going to a scan at like maybe 10 weeks and just being like, show me the kidneys. Like, well, let's look at those kidneys. Let's make sure those kidneys are working great. Like, I had really specific kind of stories I'd heard, or through being part of the terminations community, you hear a lot.
Yeah.
So it definitely was a bit on guard. But yeah, that 20-week scan was a huge relief. Definitely a lot of tears in that scan. And then managed to commit to not having any more scans after that. Just had to, hand over control. I think as you do at any point in a pregnancy, you have to relinquish a little bit of.
And emotionally, obviously this 20-week scan you mentioned, it was an exciting time, but emotionally on the whole, how were you going? How were you through this pregnancy?
I think, okay. Oh gosh, it's hard to remember. I think I was okay. I was excited, and I was most just concerned about loss. I was just all of my stress or worry was worried my baby was going to die. That you have this, or at least for me, everyone has a different take on it. But for me, I had already been the 1 in 1,000 once. And so when I was told like there's a risk of 1 in 100 for this thing, well, that feels huge now. 1 in 100 to me feels big. It's not a certainty, but to me feels almost like a certainty. I will probably be that one, So I kind of, whereas I know I've spoken with other lost mums who have said, well, if I've been the 1 in 1,000, I'll surely be the one of the 99.9, that have faith in that. Whereas I was kind of on the other opposite end, where I was like, every risk is really big now. So that was my main like mental health challenge. And the best tip I probably came across on one of the forums was that they just said, look, I think in pregnancies after loss, you think, I need to stop with all these negative thoughts. I just need to not have these negative thoughts. And they just said, you're not actually going to be able to stop yourself having those negative thoughts. You're going to keep doing it every day. You'll keep doing it. So instead of being annoyed with yourself that you can't stop having this negativity, every time you have a negative thought, just follow it with but what if that didn't happen? And what if it is a healthy pregnancy and I have a beautiful baby? So you have the negative thought, you have space for that, but then you have an equal amount of space for a positive thought. And that actually was fantastic, because then you walk away from that feeling like on the lighter side rather than still stuck in the deep thought.
Yeah.
So that after everything, that was like probably the most useful practical tip I really heard. And I think that actually I was speaking to someone recently who has anxiety about something else. So I think this tip could work in all aspects of life, not just in pregnancy after loss.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just helps with that mindset. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move forwards with the pregnancy. Yeah. Did it start to shift at any stage towards, I guess, more rather than being concerned about loss to, okay, I'm actually now really excited about the birth? Or like, was there a shift where there was less concern?
There was never less concern really until after my child's initial like newborn screening tests and stuff all came back.
Yeah, right.
Like that even alive baby in my arms, there was still some concern for him.
Okay.
But there was an excitement for birth because I hadn't birthed in my second pregnancy. So there was like an acceptance of, regardless of whether my baby's alive or not, I get to birth him and I get to hold him, and there was some excitement around that. I chose to go with private midwives this time. So I had like really beautiful care. long appointments, because I knew I couldn't share my history with different people all the time.
Yeah.
So I had, and I'm a student midwife, so I was like, this is my opportunity to experience what kind of gold standard continuity looks like. And unfortunately, it was a low-risk pregnancy. So I had that option. And so that was really lovely. Yeah, like really embraced that. Got some beautiful photos of like my daughter doing the Doppler ultrasound, Doppler auscultations. And the first moment I thought, oh gosh, I'm enjoying this pregnancy was when I got my maternity photos. And they were just, my photographer's been with us for many years. So she's close and to all our family. And so then just seeing those photos was just like, oh, they were beautiful photos. And you just think, gosh, you saw the beauty in my body. And that was probably the first time. And so that I would have got those photos at like 38 weeks maybe. And I really, enjoyed probably those last few weeks, I think. Physically, struggled, but.
Now, before we talk about the birth, I'd love to know, in terms of your pregnancy journey and feeling strong and exercise and staying active, did anything, like how did you manage that? Did anything change compared to first? Like what's your main tip around, caring for your body during pregnancy?
Oh gosh, look, I definitely found it hard to like find time around caring for a toddler and caring for my body. I think that I got lucky in a sense that I was exercising a lot during all the IVF and everything. So my starting point for this pregnancy was very strong. And I thought for sure I was going to have like prolapse symptoms in this pregnancy because I had urinary leaking after my daughter was born. And I thought, I've not been doing what I should be doing. Like, I'm definitely going to get heaviness and probably leaking in this pregnancy, like third trimester. I kind of expected that. But shockingly, I think all of the exercise and strength building for my mental health before I conceived actually was protective then. And I was objectively like felt stronger and my body handled it quite well, I think, compared to my first child.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And that's one of the best things to help with pelvic floor and prevention of pelvic floor issues is actually just to stay strong. And
so I was doing a lot of, Pilates and that sort of low impact work.
Yeah.
I think in pregnancy with my sickness, I really drop off a lot. But I was, still doing shifts in the hospital until I was 34 weeks, I think. So I was still having to be quite physically mobile. And then rested after that until birth, really. Yeah.
Okay, talk us through the day of the birth, or the day that you went into labour. Or
so I was certain I would have this baby earlier. I don't know. I went to 41 and 4 with my daughter, and I just in my head was like, I've done it once. I'll go at like 39, 40 weeks, surely. My body knows what to do. Yeah, that didn't happen. So it wasn't until I was 40 weeks that I started to realise, actually the date that my sister died is only 7 days away. I hadn't even until that point really even realised that those dates, my due date and her passing date, memorial date, were close by. And so then it kind of became more and more apparent as I got further along and I was still pregnant. And so then I started to get some anxiety about, oh gosh, like this baby better not be born on that day because it's a really painful day for me and I'm just not ready. Like that's not going to be any good for me. So from about 40 weeks, I started to be like, okay, let's get this moving, which was earlier than in my first. I was very like, baby will come when they're ready. This time I was like, no, let's speed it up. So I did ask for a stretch and sweet. Maybe 40+2. Anyway, we held off on that. I didn't end up getting it. Every day that went on, I was feeling more and more anxious about stillbirth, even though I know the stats and things just in my mind. I was just wanted my baby outside of my body. Like I felt like my body had let me down, a few times and I just needed the responsibility away now. And so it ended up being 40 and 6 that I got a stretch and sweep done. I get a lot of racks and hits in my pregnancy, so same with Elle. I have them regularly from like 20 weeks pregnant. So at this point, over 40 weeks. I'm getting them pretty often. They're strong. Like my body, I'm pretty confident like my body's progressing. So when we had the stretch and sweep at 40+6, I was 3 to 4 centimeters dilated already. But she just said that baby was like quite high and probably a bit posterior, which was almost identical to the experience I had with my daughter. But knowing like my midwifery stuff, I guess, being a bit, having some practical tools I guess I could use. So I went home and I was doing spinning babies maneuvers and Welch's, which is like another maneuver you can do for a baby that's high. So I went home from that.
Describe that one to me.
It's like, for example, if you laid down on your back on a table and then your legs are straight but just hanging but not touching the ground. So there's like a gravity pull, I guess, of your lower half.
Yeah.
It's not very comfortable when you're heavily pregnant, but I could do those things home that day and I could get my contractions to like 3-4 minutes apart. Strong, long, good contractions. But if I stopped all those things and just had a sleep, it would peter back out to about 10 minutes apart. So I was kind of in this weird afternoon where I was like, well, I can kind of put myself like into labour, but it's not staying there. And also I don't want to fatigue because I know what's to come. So I also need to prioritise rest. So I did a bit of that and then I would just be sleeping on the couch in the afternoon, did a bit, slept on the couch. And my daughter got home from daycare and everything. And so about 7 o'clock, I was still doing some things and they were getting closer together, I guess. And now at this point, I'm not having to actively keep them close. They're kind of staying. It's not pitting out back to 10 minutes, maybe to 5 minutes, but it's progressing in that way. But I was a little bit nervous, like, am I artificially trying to get this moving and I shouldn't be doing that? So then we called the midwife at 9 p.m. and I think, their advice to just stay home as long as you can. I think my husband was a bit nervous. So I had got a private midwife, both because I wanted that type of care, but also my daughter's birth was quite fast. So if things just happened as quickly, potentially we would be having baby at home. And my husband was like, well, at least the private midwife can come to our house if it ends up being an accidental home birth. And I wasn't against having a home birth. I had a postpartum hemorrhage after my first. So I was pretty confident it wouldn't happen again, but also, just in case.
Yeah.
And my husband was a bit nervous about that idea. So we said, we'll go into the birth centre, which is only 5 minutes down the road for the labour, but we've got a private midwife who can come to our house. So at that point, my husband's saying, like, are you coming to the house? Because, like, I'm nervous. A baby's just going to come out at any moment. I felt pretty confident it was a while away. So then I think we called my mum at that point and she drove from the Sunshine Coast down and luckily, Elle's in bed. So that was all nice and smooth, kind of. She arrived about 11 and at that point, my husband, I was in the shower, labouring in the shower, still like fairly confident baby wasn't coming anytime soon, but my husband was a bit nervous at that point. And to be honest, I was like, maybe the urge to push could come on at any moment. I'm not certain. So we went to the hospital then. We got to the hospital at midnight and our midwives arrived at a similar time. So my private midwives have practicing right at the hospital there. So they were able to come in and be our midwife in the hospital as well, which was really lovely. And I was a little bit in denial that I just didn't think I was progressing. I thought, nothing's really changing. My daughter's labour was extremely hard and fast. Her waters broke at the start and it was intense contractions back to back until she was born, whereas in this labour, my waters were intact. It was very like mild and slow and lovely. Like from that perspective, it was really quite lovely. But to the point where I thought, I haven't had a contraction for 5 minutes. Like I've brought in my private midwives from their homes in the middle of the night. I said to them, can you just do a vaginal examination, confirm whether anything's happening because maybe I should just go home. Like maybe we should all just go home. And my midwife just said, no, like, why do you want me to do a VE? If you don't have a baby in 3 hours, then I'll do one then. But like, I'm pretty confident what I'm seeing, just trust in your body, turn off your brain, which is hard. But after that, I did. I was just like, no, that's their job now. That's their job. They're already here. I've already called them out of bed. This, it is what it is.
It always happens at night time. I feel so sorry for midwives.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I was using the TENS machine. I had my hypnobirthing tracks, like listening to my hypnobirthing tracks. I was just out of the bath pool at that time, just leaning over the bed on the yoga ball, that sort of thing. And then, I don't know, must have been an hour or so later, my midwife just said, I think you could hop in the pool now. And I remember thinking like, oh, she thinks I can hop in the pool. That's good. That's good. This is something, progressing. That's good. What she thinks is, yeah. So I hopped in the pool and that was lovely. And it was just such a different labour because it was just had these lovely breaks, like 2-3 minutes, just chilling, waiting for the next contraction. The contractions were strong, but I didn't have any back pain in the labour. So those periods of rest were just really lovely rest in the pool. And then, at some point, and then maybe an hour later, like I had that first guttural push feeling. And I remember being like, yes, we've made it here, like that feeling of pushing, I find. Yeah. Like just, I'm just happy to get there. Yeah. And so then, you can ask us.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's so lovely hearing this positive, like it's so great that you had a positive experience with everything that you'd gone through in the last few years. Like this is just a delight.
Yeah, it was. To hear. It was lovely. Yeah. And it's interesting because after I reflected on it, I said, I actually don't recall ever in this pregnancy thinking, I should prepare in case it's a cesarean section. Like I had an extremely high belief that I've had one vaginal birth. My body knows what to do. It'll be a vaginal birth. Like I didn't really even have any real inkling that it wouldn't be. And I think that's an extremely privileged thing to be able to say. I had no fear about cesarean and I had this kind of unwavering belief. And to the point where I had asked for an induction only maybe 2 days later because I didn't want to go any further overdue this time. Yeah. And I was like totally fine with that. I thought, my body, can have an induction. It'll birth vaginally. Like it's going to be fine. I just had that belief. So I'm really glad I did.
So going back to that urge that you received to push, talk us through that. How did it feel? Take us through the sensation.
Oh, I always think it's like, when you have that feeling that you need to vomit and you can't stop yourself from vomiting if you're sick or something. And it's like that, but internally and downwards. And it's like a gagging, like internal gagging downwards feeling. And I could hear it in myself and I could feel it. And my midwife came over and she's like, oh, that sounded different, didn't it? I was like, yes, it did. Like, we're here to the pushing phase. And I'm not sure.
And you're in the water at this stage?
Yeah, I'm in the birth pool, I did have the cannula in, which the hospital wanted that in case I had a postpartum hemorrhage. They just wanted the cannula already in place. So in terms of intervention, that's the only thing that I had. But it was just attached with nothing on it. But other than that, just in the birth pool, my husband's sitting there at the pool, like my head was between his knees, kind of focusing, listening to my hypnobirthing. It was all just pretty calm. And I'm not sure how long I was pushing for, to be honest. But that just got stronger and stronger. And I think I changed onto all fours, maybe, to birth his head.
And I always felt like the first time I had to push with my first baby, I had no idea what I had to do. Whereas my second and third, and by the time I got to my third baby, I was a pushing pro. Like, did you feel the same sort of, did you feel it was easier to know how to push second time around?
So my experience with my first was that I had the pushing reflex and they had said I wasn't dilated enough and I needed to stop pushing. For about 20 minutes, I was kind of coached not to push. And then when I was told I could push, I pushed really hard and she was born really quickly. And I think that was pretty unfavourable to my pelvic floor. And I think, that had an impact on my recovery. And so with his birth, we talked about all that through with the midwives. And so I just really loved that I wasn't being told not to push. I was just told to follow my instincts and I really just encouraged to slow it down as much as I could. So I was just doing the panting, like pretending to blow out candles, just doing that through all the urges to push. So he was born quite slowly, I think, quite a lot of contractions to birth his head.
Oh, wait, you were doing the panting when you had the urge to push?
Yeah.
Oh, so you weren't pushing it?
No, I'm trying to stop my push. Not stop my pushing, but I'm trying to, for it to be as slow as possible. So it's pushing, but I'm trying to just breathe him out slowly.
And is this something you talked about with midwives beforehand and they coached you on at the time?
I think, we had talked about how, like, potentially in my first birth, I wasn't really encouraged to follow my instincts. I was told, don't push or do this, don't do this.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of your physiology, you know, if your body's trying to push your baby out, it knows that that's the right thing to do usually in a normal, you know, normally progressing birth. And so, I think it's quite common to be just encouraged to push, but to make that birth of the head as slow as it can be so that you have time for everything to stretch and progress.
So you felt like you were still pushing, but you were just panting through it.
So I actually
slowly. Okay, right.
And I have, I wasn't actively like helping the pushing. My body, you know, your uterus is just doing it. I have a video. My midwives took a video of his birth actually. So
amazing.
It's quite lovely to watch it back because it reminds you, like, I was in a lot of pain. I'm not going to like pretend that I wasn't. When I listened back to that video, I'm like, gosh, that, you know, over time your brain like forgets it. But I watched that video and I can hear the pain that I'm in. But I never once asked for like gas and air or anything. I know at this point my husband said to the midwives, do you think we should be getting her the gas and air? But I knew, like, no, I don't need the gas and air for this phase. Like, you want me to be focusing the air downwards. So his head was born slowly, and that was really cool because this time with my midwifery brain, I could actually feel the features of his head being born. Like I could feel the nose, and then I could envisage like the chin coming out, and I could like, and I remember saying to my midwife, like, oh, the chin just came out. She's like, yeah, dude, like that was really cool to be able to like mentally, conceptually feel all the parts. And then they got me to flip over onto kind of my back, still in the pool, and birth his body. So his body, it took quite, at this point, I did start to push with that next contraction to get his body out because I didn't want, I just wanted his body to come out smoothly. I didn't want to get in a situation where I've got to sit out and I'm in the pool and I'm needing to get out of the pool because his body's not coming, you know, normally. And I can watch that video and see that to birth his body was quite tough. My midwife has like repositioned my legs. I didn't know she was doing this at the time, just to kind of increase the angle to help his body come out because his body wasn't coming out, I feel, as easily as I've seen most bodies being born. So he was a bit bigger than we were expecting because I hadn't had a scan for 20 weeks. So we just assumed normal. So, you know, my bundle heights were normal. So we just assumed normal size. Yeah, but he was a bit bigger than we expected. So, he was born and he was well and he cried straight away and it was awesome.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, pretty lucky. And thankfully they did get me out of the pool after a little bit just to monitor my bleeding. I was bleeding again somewhat, not as much as the last time, so it was okay, but enough to kind of get out of the pool to monitor it. And then, birthed my placenta. Just on like a mat thing on the ground, whatever. I did end up having a second degree tear, pretty much the exact same tear that I had last time, which I chose to get stitched. So that was the only thing. So he was born around 3:30 a.m. and we went home at 2 p.m. that day. That was really to have your baby, feel okay and go home. But when they weighed him, he was 4.56 kilos. So, you know, good 10-pound baby that we weren't expecting. And I think there's a lot of fear now around big babies. So to be able to just have this lovely, calm water birth with no intervention just was really lovely. Yeah.
And for those listening, a second degree tear, it's still a relatively minor tear. It's, you know, there's a really good chance of recovery. Like the first and second degree tears are the most common. It's the third and fourth degree tears that they're a lot rarer, but the second degree tears tends to have no issues with recovery long term.
And if you think about it, like my daughter was about 1 kilogram smaller, like 3.6 or something, and I had the exact same size tear that I had for her that I had for him, like no different. And I just wonder, like, if the scar tissue is a bit weaker or something, you know. Yeah.
So recovery-wise, and I guess breastfeeding and all this second time round, how did it go?
It went pretty well. Look, I was extremely grateful that I had chosen to go with a private midwife, that I had the means to have private midwifery care, in that, I had checked out that day and then I had a home visit every day for 7 days. They came to my house to check on me. And I know that before my first, I had known that was kind of like a benefit of going with a private midwife, but I kind of didn't think it was that important. I think I was like, the 2 visits I'll get from the hospital in a week will be enough. And even being a student midwife and knowing all the things, having done the courses on breastfeeding and all of this, so much changes in 7 days in your body and in your baby in those first 7 days. And every day, I recall every day the midwife came, I had a different thing I wanted to talk to them about. And so that kind of care in that first 7 days, as I was establishing breastfeeding, like my body goes, everybody goes through a lot of changes, was just really, really great. And I think got my breastfeeding journey off to a better start than I had experienced previously. So while it still wasn't easy, the establishment of the breastfeeding, I was really well supported and it made it feel a lot easier. And then we went on to feed. Yeah, well, that was all fine.
Amazing.
And then postpartum recovery, again, like I do kind of attribute it to being a bit more intuitive in the pushing phase, in that my pelvic floor recovered really well. I remember going and seeing a pelvic floor specialist and, they ask you all the things about the birth, and before they've even done the internal to check the muscles and everything, they're spilling off all of the stats of my risk for, having pelvic floor muscle tears and things because of his size. And then for them to do an internal and say, everything's fine, there's no issue at all. I remember them, like, it's like they thought that there was going to be, they were really preparing me. So just from those perspectives, like, incredible
amazing
recovery.
And you've been part of Fitness Mama, the pregnancy postnatal app, for a few years now. How has it helped you during your pregnancy and recovery journey?
Yeah, I've always used it in recovery, pretty useless in pregnancy. But for me, I find it hard to find the right balance because exercise is so important for me in terms of my mental health and feeling well in my body. I find it that period of returning to exercise challenging in just finding a good provider that, like yourself, that gives good cues for how your body can feel postnatally, and just having things broken down into, your how far along you are postnatally, or how your body feels. Really helpful just to kind of support you as you enter exercise again. And maybe, you learn a lot after your first and your experience after your first. So that was probably, you learn from that. And this second time around, like, that process felt a lot smoother. But I also had a lot less, like, I've never had any urinary leakage, which I had a decent amount after my first. So,
amazing.
Like, I think you have that experience once and you think you will have it every time. But I had almost a completely opposite recovery.
Fantastic. Yeah. And you do mention a good point then, like, rather than having a baby and then getting back into exercise, what you did was you bridged the gap. So to help you get back into exercise, you were doing these, for example, the Fitness Mama workouts to build up that strength so that you can get back to doing your normal exercise. Yeah,
and being okay to hold off on what you used to do for longer. I think the first time around I was just wanted to do it straight away. But,
very clever.
Yeah.
Brianne, I'm aware of the time. You have just been talking to me for over 2 hours now across the 2 podcast episodes. So I just want to say thank you so much. Like, again, like, you're incredible. Your story is incredible. I am really thankful that you have taken the time out of your busy day to share your story with us.
And thank you for providing this platform and supporting women to share stories that aren't easy to share, because I think it's really important that everyone can hear something that they might identify with. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Brianne. We'll chat to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Kat.
Thanks. Bye. Thanks for listening to the Fitness Mama podcast, brought to you by the Fitness Mama freebies found at www.fitnessmama.com/free. So please take a few seconds to leave a review, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and be sure to take a screenshot of this podcast, upload it to your social media, and tag me at FitnessMama so I can give you a shout out too. Until next time, remember, an active pregnancy, confident childbirth, and strong postnatal recovery is something that you deserve. Remember our disclaimer, materials and contents in this podcast are intended as general information only and shouldn't substitute any medical advice, diagnosis or treatment. I'll see you soon.